In New York City, the guys and gals of the Overseas Press Club gather at a luncheon to give Yank magazine a 24-gun salute. Yours truly is giving out at the microphone under the paternal eye of Mark Twain, another newspaper man who I'm sure would have given his okay to the proceedings. Down at the end of the table is the Army's best-known private, Marion Hargrove. Did I say private? Sorry. It seems the good Hargrove is now a sergeant. Remember those swell stories that came out of Guadalcanal? Well, Sergeant Mac Morris, talking to General Armstrong, is the fellow who wrote them. On the left is Colonel Forsberg, officer in charge of Yank. On the right, Captain Weeks. And that's me again, seated next to Colonel Munson, chief of the Army's information branch, and the father of Yank and Army News Service. Everyone here feels that Yank is doing a terrific job, and they want to be around to see Norman Cousins of the Saturday Review of Literature meet Yank's managing editor, Sergeant McCarty. The Saturday Review is a sort of a highbrow sheet, but it recognizes merit when it sees it. And that's why Mr. Cousins is presenting Yank with an award for its distinguished services to American letters. For Yank magazine is one of the best jobs in journalism to come out of this war. And the reason begins right in the New York office. It's for enlisted men. It's run by enlisted men. Here are the fellows who handle the weekly message center department, so popular in North Africa when I was there. This is Sergeant Hofeller, who selects the pictures that populate the barracks walls from Alaska to the Persian Gulf. No. Ah, that's better. Much better. In fact, just what the doctor ordered. This is Sergeant Jack Scott, whom I first met in England, where he was learning to qualify as an aerial gunner. Later, he flew with the 8th Air Force over Germany and told Yank readers what it was like. And this is Sergeant Brody, who was in the South Pacific. Before he drew the enemy, he had to fight him. Perhaps that's why he's become one of the top illustrators in the country. Yes, you guessed it. Sergeant George Baker, creator of the most popular comic strip character in or out of the Army.
George, where do you get your ideas for Sad Sack?
Well, some of this stuff has happened to me just as soon as it can happen to any GI.
At 2, Sergeant George Myers scooped the world for Yank. While at Kiska, he was on hand to interview Colonel Verbeck of G2.
Colonel Verbeck, I understand that you have in your possession certain documents which throw some light on the Japanese evacuation of Kiska. I wonder if you'd be good enough to give us a translation of any of these documents that you happen to have at hand.
Well, we have the general evacuation order, and we have certain other fragments which throw light on the evacuation, and after all the documents have been found, I believe we'll have the entire story.
But New York, as I found out after a talk with the boys, is only the home base for Yank. From here, 2 overseas editions are sent to Alaska and Greenland, and mats are prepared for Yank's 10 overseas bureaus. Special arrangements with the Air Transport Command make it possible for each edition to get their material in record-breaking time. The Bureau has its own staff which is responsible for printing an edition in its area, and which adds local stories and pictures that it knows will be of special interest to their particular readers. Yank is not only read globally, but it's written and printed globally too. Not that getting out any of these editions has been a snap. There are always problems when it comes to getting a press. The Middle East edition, I found out when I was there, is printed in Tel Aviv on a German-made press which is owned by Arabs, remodeled by a Jewish refugee, and finally rebuilt by Army engineers. Before the war, it was used only to print grapefruit wrappers. But neither this nor any other overseas edition has ever missed its weekly deadline, nor has a Yank production crew ever failed to produce an issue in a new area, no matter what obstacles had to be overcome. And take it from an old newspaper man, that's something. But it isn't all, nor is it the reason for Yank's huge circulation. and 1,000 letters it receives every week from soldiers and sailors. The real reason, as I found in England and in North Africa, was that Yank gives the fellows a chance to sound off about what's on their mind. The world over, the Yank soldier feels that Yank magazine is one of the strongest links between him and the rest of the Army. But Yank magazine can only do a part of the job of letting the GIs throughout the world know what's cooking. The other part must be done by the Army News Service, the largest news agency ever operated. And here in New York, enlisted men drawn from all theaters are working overtime to see that the American soldier and sailor is the best informed fighting man in the world. Headline news is taken from the leading wire services, while all the daily papers throughout the country are culled for sport news, Broadway rumor, and Hollywood gossip. And except for purposes of security, nothing is censored. Nothing is hoped up. Make with the facts and let the men draw their own conclusions is the policy of the Army News Service. After the news is received, it's used by Army editors throughout the world who are responsible for the editing, printing, and distributing of our many overseas newspapers. The Stars and Stripes, which is printed in Cairo. The Dispatch in the Persian Gulf Command. The Ladd Field Midnight Sun in Alaska. More than one GI returning from the Aleutians has let me know just how he feels about that bulletin board. And here's a shot of a Red Cross train in Italy. I can imagine what a little news means to a group of wounded men who haven't seen a paper or anything like it for a month. Sometimes the news is late. Sometimes it doesn't get there at all. But the Army never stops sending it out. I haven't been to the South Pacific, so don't take my word as to what news means out there. Take General MacArthur's word. Quote, "To combat areas, news is as necessary as bread and bullets." Close quote. Then there are the shortwave newscasts, heard by our men the world over.
Here is the late news for U.S. Army overseas reporters. Each word of this news will be repeated so that reporters may copy it down.
Soviet, forces, have, smashed, over, old, border.
And that's it. Yank and Army News Service, the greatest information agency ever operated by the United States Army.